Welcome back to Relatively Weird, the podcast where a couple of cousins get together and talk about everything weird. I am Kim.
I am Jilli.
So today, it's not really a story.
Okay. A theme?
A theme. A history, if you will.
Okay.
Towards the end, there's a bit of a supernatural component, little tiny. Take it for what it is. But today I'm going to talk to you about asylums.
Okay.
So I think part of what interested me in our neck of the woods, there are several hospital locations in the state of Massachusetts that have closed down and kind of been like just remnants left to many have been purchased and all of that. And we'll talk about that. But it's just sort of this like piece of history that is there. They kind of went like, oh, shoot, that didn't really work the way we wanted. And then just left.
Forgotten.
Yeah.
And the people forgotten.
Yeah. Yes. So I don't know. It kind of struck me as it's not going to be the funniest. I think it's a little depressing. There are terms, names of things that suck. So it's not going to be quite as bad as the freak show episode, but I don't know. So it's always struck me as interesting. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump into it.
Okay.
So most of our story sort of initiates in the late 18th century and forward.
Okay. So the 18th century would be the 1700s.
Yes.
Okay. You always have to go like back.
And that's just to kind of get us in there. So prior to the late 18th century, how were people with mental illness treated? They didn't really have a lot of options. So if you were a person with mental illness in the U.S., you were pretty much cared for by your family at home.
Or not.
Or not. So not everyone had that capability. So, they ended up in jails or almshouses.
Maybe?
Yeah. So like a shelter that were typically meant for people who were elderly or ill or poor, couldn't afford to go to a normal hospital.
Is that like through churches or was that like a public?
Like a public service, like a community. Probably. I mean, I have a feeling they were
Sometimes,
probably
maybe.
run by churches. So you just had situations where there was no option for them. People didn't. I'm sure families shunned these people too.
Yeah.
And said, we can't really take care of you, and left them to their own devices. So much like the physical disabilities that we talked about in the sideshow episode, at the time people looked at mental illness as a reflection of like moral or spiritual afflictions. I didn't really understand that it was medical. And the people struggling with these ailments, and sometimes their families even, were punished, either publicly shamed.
Yeah, like
the
socially.
people were jailed. Yeah. So you didn't have support. There was no...
Were people like, I'm sure you'll tell me, but were women like blamed, you think, for some of their offspring being not mentally okay?
Probably.
Okay.
I
don't know.
So it's interesting because later on I touch on a very, very small list of what could possibly land somebody into an asylum.
Just being a woman.
Female-related things. Yeah,
just
it was
not being a man.
not awesome at the time.
All right.
So there were hospitals at the time that kind of, quote unquote, cared for people with mental illness, but they were essentially treated like prisoners. They were subdued most of the time, restrained physically, and just sort of kept, they were a nuisance, right? So like the idea was sort of to keep them under control. And I think in people's eyes at the time, they thought that they were keeping them and the community safe from them, but it's obviously misguided. So eventually the idea of treating these people became seen as a possibility. And the population is increasing in the U.S. specifically. So you have people emigrating into the country, you have populations booming, and the instances of mental illness obviously are also increasing.
So are you talking specifically about like the US or just kind of in general?
This is going to focus on the US.
Okay.
The stories behind a lot of these places are all very similar.
Yeah.
The rise and fall of them is all very similar. What we learned, what we knew at the time came from people in Europe. So we had a lot of the same ideas coming over here. The idea was we saw a situation where maybe these people can be treated, not just kept alive. And,
Well, that's positive.
Yeah.
Or at least the thought
Yes.
is positive.
You're going to see there's a lot of good intentions at the beginning
Yeah.
of all of this. So populations are increasing in the community, and that therefore means the population of mentally ill people is increasing, and now we need something to happen. So the first public mental health facility was actually opened in Virginia and had its first patients in 1773.
Okay.
The name was real 1773-ish. It was called the Public Hospital for Persons of Insane and Disordered Minds.
Okay.
They renamed it much later on
Yeah.
Eastern State Hospital.
Oh, okay.
And it actually is still open today.
You said Eastern State Hospital?
Yes.
Okay.
Different from Eastern State Penitentiary.
I was thinking that, and then I was like, it is not a penitentiary, but
It is-
penitentiary?
Penitentiary.
Penitentiary? Yeah.
You're right.
Okay.
It looks like tentiary.
Yes.
I have another word like that in here. Anyway, I won't get to that.
Okay.
So again, still open today. When I say it's the first public mental health facility, so it's funded by the public, the governing bodies at the time. Now, the first private mental health specific hospital was opened in 1817. So we jumped.
Yeah.
You didn't have your own private one until 1817.
There's only one?
At the time. At the time.
Was it overcrowded?
They all get overcrowded
Yeah,
when we
true.
get there. So the private hospital opened in Philly. It was called the Asylum for the Relief of Persons Deprived of the Use of Their Reason.
I feel like that's more a roundabout way to say it, but okay.
I know, it takes the onus off of
Yeah.
You've been deprived of the use of your reason. They renamed it Friends Hospital.
Okay.
It was a Quaker facility.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why that type of Friends.
Okay.
Also still open, right?
And like working? Like
Yeah,
that
still
it's not just
functioning.
like a museum or something?
No.
It's like okay.
No.
Oh.
I mean, not in like its 1817 form. I think
yeah.
it's
I'll let you get there. I just all right, I'll just let you continue.
okay. We'll get there. So the biggest problem and the reason people needed more health facilities was really the poor population. You had these rich families who could afford private care, who could afford private hospitals, but the issue was the people who didn't have money.
So I don't know if you're
Still
gonna
today.
get there, but do we know when like official psychology was started? I should probably know that because I took a lot of psychology classes. But like, were there psychologists, or were they just like, let's just put them in a place?
No, at the time there were,
Okay,
yes, and there were organizations
like it was a science
that
by then.
people, yes,
Okay.
for sure, yeah. So again, private hospitals were not really accessible to much of the population. They needed public state-funded hospitals. So state-run asylums really started popping up all across the United States, starting in the 1840s. So it was looked at as a solution for society as a whole. They care for the patients humanely, and might actually be successful in treating them.
So
Because
they
it just
can-
wasn't seen as
and
curable.
They would leave then, right? Like
That was the goal.
Okay.
By using what was known as quote-unquote moral treatment, like fresh air, physical activity, and calm surroundings, the goal was a cure.
That's not a bad start,
It's a great,
at least.
the meaning is, they are so well-meaning.
Okay.
In order to provide the best opportunity to meet these needs, many of the state-run asylums were built in the Kirkbride plan. And I feel like, have you not heard of? Okay.
No.
So Thomas Kirkbride was a psychiatrist in
Okay.
Pennsylvania, and he actually founded the Association of Medical Superintendents of American Institutions for the Insane, now known as American Psychiatric Association.
Oh, that's much more manageable.
We are so much more concise now than they were, I guess, in the early 19th century.
Yeah.
Thomas Kirkbride's hospitals, they were generally big Victorian-era buildings.
Probably beautiful.
Stunning. And I'm gonna fill like this Instagram post is gonna just be filled with, there's so many opportunities for pictures.
Yeah. And okay, yeah.
Yeah. Again, Victorian era buildings, they were placed on large acreage, often in the hundreds of acres.
Yeah. I mean, if I just think about it in my mind, like there's no other surrounding buildings,
Right.
which
very, very quiet,
Yeah.
away from, the idea was to be sort of rural,
Yeah.
away from chaos. Because a lot of these people, especially if they were lower income in cities, it's just busy, and so they wanted to get them away. A lot of the campuses had numerous outbuildings for a variety of things. The main building had a large central section with long wings that spread usually out diagonally. Mm-hmm. It almost looked like a bat from above. And the goal was to allow for a lot of natural light and have it open to the air. There were 73 known Kirkbride hospitals built in the U.S. between 1948 and 1910. One in Canada, one in Australia. 4 of the 73 are actually in Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
The intended max number of patients usually was 250 with a staff of like 71.
Seems about right.
Seems manageable.
Yes.
So, one of these hospitals is called the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, which I believe has been on, I would imagine, multiple shows, but I feel like maybe Fear.
Oh my God.
Did it?
You just unlocked a whole thing I didn't remember.
If Fear? Okay. MTV's Fear,
Yeah.
for those of you who are not in the know, was such a good show. It was like,
You had it on a lot, and
Okay.
I was 8, Kimberly.
you're welcome. So
That's why we're here today.
exactly. I made you what you are. No. So number 1, great theme song. It was Godsmack Voodoo. Creepy as hell. Mm. They went in. They had like these. Oh my God! Just like essentially GoPro cameras, but they were just these usual
Big
harnesses.
Yeah.
Lights were always off wherever they were. They had radios, and they had to do challenges in these haunted. So Eastern State Penitentiary was one of them.
Was it?
Too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they usually had to go and do these crazy like radio silence, or you had to go sit. I think Eastern State, they had to sit in the electric chair.
I forget what the goal was. Was it just everybody
To make it.
to the end? Because I mean, some people would tap out, but I don't know that a lot of people would tap out.
No, and sometimes, and so they were each given a color,
Yeah.
and each thing was for a specific color. And I think if you tapped out, another person could do it.
Oh, they
for
had
you,
like
had the
teams
opportunity
and
to
stuff.
do it.
Yeah.
And it was for money, but I loved that show. Anyway,
I do
think
remember.
You can still watch it on like YouTube or whatever. Bring it back to streaming. Whoever listens and has any control. Anyway. Sidebar. Over. So the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, it opened in 1863, and I was actually able to find a list of reasons for admission on Reddit. I have a picture of it. I'll probably post it on the...
Be a woman.
Basically. So again, this is just a fraction. I did pick some of the ridiculous ones.
Okay.
One of the first ones was actually kicked in the head by a horse. Was
I'm
I mean,
sorry. I'm so sorry.
but it's so specific. It's so weirdly specific.
It is, but it probably happened a lot.
Yes,
that's what I mean.
There was another one that was like I think fell from a horse in war or something. Just very very specific. We would call it like head trauma or
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
So okay. So here we go. Get ready. According to this list, I feel like I could be committed several times over. Mental excitement.
ADHD, maybe?
Oh, maybe. Opium habit. Fair. Epileptic fits. Because I believe at the time they did not realize it was probably more
Like
of a...
physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Grief. Fair.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have depression on the list, but I assume that that's what they would... Ill treatment by your husband.
So you got to go?
You got to go.
Okay.
Yep. Imaginary female trouble.
What
Dunno.
does that mean?
Did not really sure. Novel reading. Shit.
Wait.
Screwed.
If you're a girl or just anyone?
I think anyone.
What?
I think if you were like, I don't know, think about how many movies, like old-timey movies, with like the kid who reads too much and he's weird and he doesn't go out and do his work and listen.
So they're going to put you away because you read? Okay.
Desertion of or by your husband. So either you desert him or he deserts you.
So is this... Okay.
Please hold, because I might answer your question. in a second.
Okay. Go ahead.
Uterine derangement. Women problems. I'm sorry, women trouble. And female disease. As a side note, husbands were able to get their wives committed and then legally took over their assets by default at this time. So I do think that...
If you were having good intentions
Yes.
by opening something, because you know mental illness is not new. It's been happening since we've had brains. So, yes, of course, people need help. But
Yes.
it makes it seem like they go, we don't know what to do with this woman. She can't do anything. She can't go out and get a job. She's useless to society. She was left by her husband, let's say.
Causing too much trouble.
Her family doesn't want her back. Where do we put her? She can't be out on the streets causing trouble.
Yeah.
I guess you'll go to the asylum with the people who actually are there to get better. Like, how do you get better from your husband leaving you?
I don't know. And so I do think that there were instances of commitment to these hospitals being way overprescribed for a little while. When it was like somebody didn't know the answer. And I don't know what to do with you.
Overpopulated because it's like there are people. Okay, if you let's just say grief, depression, you want to hurt yourself or something. We're trying to make you not feel that way. But your neighbor is Alice, who her husband left her for another woman, and Alice doesn't have a home. So you're gonna hang out with Alice. Like, I don't know. It's just, okay.
I know. So as we sort of hinted at earlier, because fresh air and a good diet are not actually effective treatments of mental illness, a lot of patients never left. They were not being cured and they couldn't be released, but new patients kept coming. And at one point, the population in the U.S. hospitals increased 927%.
Were there any pharmaceutical stuff by that point? Like,
not yet. We will get there.
Okay.
Yes. The cost to run the hospitals was also enormous. So the initial, pie in the sky dream of these people, working the land and having jobs and being out in this beautiful area, which this area is beautiful for like a little while.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Not through the whole year. Anyway.
No.
So the initial dream has just, at this point, started to kind of crumble. And it was hard to hire experienced staff. Room was dwindling. and more extreme treatments started to be used again. So we kind of had gone to, there was restraint before, there was therapeutic treatments that were being used in regular hospitals on patients with mental illness. The goal was to get away from those. They were seen as a little bit barbaric.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But they were like, oh, shoot, maybe we do need them. And they started coming back into use.
Do you have any, examples? Or
Sure do.
Okay. Because I'm trying to... Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So the obvious one is restraint.
Yeah.
Is, straitjackets. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, usually used for people with severe depression. What they did was they were basically trying to induce a seizure using electricity. It was about 70 to 120 volts to the head.
What would a seizure do? Reset your brain, they thought?
I think that was
Okay.
And just as a little aside, electroconvulsive therapy is still used in some places
I was going
today.
to say that, but I didn't know if you were going to get to it later. But I do think... Where I heard it, I do not know. But I think some people... It does help, but in a totally different way. They don't do it the way they used to. But anyway, I'll let you continue.
So there's also insulin shock therapy or insulin coma therapy, usually used for people with schizophrenia. This wasn't really used until the 40s or 50s, 1940s or 50s.
So what do they inject you with, a bunch of
They're
insulin?
injected usually six times a week.
Oh.
For around 10 months. I'm so sorry, 2 months. Though some people did say it went on, depending on the extreme.
Was it put you to sleep?
Basically, yes. They increase the dose of insulin slowly at each dose until it induces a coma.
How did that affect their pancreas? If you're... I mean...
They're like, well, your pancreas is in trouble, but... At least you calm down.
That's very dangerous.
Yes, yeah. Then, of course, the lobotomy.
Yeah.
It began in 1935. They estimate 40,000 people in the U.S. were lobotomized. Severs the connections to the prefrontal cortex, which is
your personality.
Your personality, your decision-making, something for a lobotomy to be considered quote unquote successful. It basically left the patients more manageable.
Yeah.
They're zombies for a long time. Some of them just sort of kind of existing. And there was hydrotherapy, whether ice bath or a warm bath. It depended on what the patient was actually, what they had, what they would use. And they could last for hours or days.
What? So are you just
days?
Are you just going to the bathroom in the water?
Guess so. They probably because I assume they have to change to keep the temperature consistent.
True.
They'd have to change it out anyway. So there was also hydrotherapy where they stood the patient up in a shower and sprayed them with a high pressure hose.
Why did they think this would work?
So I was Googling hydrotherapy, and hydrotherapy in general is used today voluntarily.
So I would think of it okay, if you have a muscle issue or something, you would go to pool therapy or whatever. You would work with a physical therapist, but you wouldn't be in there for days.
No, not right. And I what this says to me is that for the most part, the medical professionals were sort of in over their heads. Of course, these things weren't changing. A schizophrenic is not going to sit in an ice bath and suddenly stop seeing things. So they're going, shoot, I don't know what else to do. Just keep them there.
So they were trying to basically put out fires at this point and be
I think, just
it's no longer for you, it's for us. Wow.
Malaria therapy was a thing.
Really?
Yep. They injected malaria parasites in hopes of inducing a high fever, which would ideally stop the disease. And it's because it was used in cases of neurosyphilis. So somebody who had neurological symptoms of syphilis.
Well, I'm not a doctor, obviously. But fever is supposed to help with certain sicknesses.
Well, yeah, and the idea is that you're getting your body kicked into gear. You have to fight this. Logically, right. Otherwise, you're just like malaria.
What do they cure syphilis with now? Because it is a virus, right? Oh, it's not a virus.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Just here's some penicillin.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was a virus for a second. Not a bacterial infection, but it is. Yeah, okay.
This one sounds lovely, but I don't think it was. Deep sleep therapy. Generally used
with the insulin?
Not insulin. For usually on schizophrenics, patients were kept asleep for days to weeks, and they used barbiturates to induce the sleep.
Were
people have died.
I was going to say, were people
overdose.
dying? Because, yeah.
The public has started by like the 1920s and 30s to just go like, okay, this doesn't seem as humane as it was supposed to be.
No.
The care just wasn't there. The places were overcrowded. There wasn't enough funding, especially when the economy was taking a hit. So figure the 1920s to 30s, that's rough.
Yeah.
And then also, before that and after it, we're involved in major wars. So...
yeah, that's the last thing on people's minds, yeah.
So conditions declined. Like I said, there were way too many patients. They couldn't pay experienced staff, so you're having inexperienced people come in here. They're not very well trained. Abuse occurs. The buildings were starting to suffer. Imagine buildings of that size, grounds 100 acres. I mean, you need staff just to care for the facilities. Yeah. So there were actually cases of patients starving to death during this stretch of time. So
okay, go ahead. No, I think you're going to answer my question.
And there was also this fear that the patients were being institutionalized, which is the idea that even if we cured them of the mental illness that they have, they can't function outside. They've been in a hospital facility for too long. We take that into consideration when we talk about prisoners. Somebody who's spent their life in and out of jail for one reason or another has become institutionalized, and they have a hard time functioning outside. So this idea was that, like, we're not helping them get out.
And there wasn't probably any funding for, like, a halfway house kind of thing where you're like, okay, you'll live between. Yeah, you'll try to get a job and then come back here and, yeah.
So thankfully, I think, in 1950, we had the discovery of the first psychotropic drug, which was chlorpromazine, or as we call it, thorazine here.
Oh, okay.
It is an antipsychotic. So between 1955 and 1967, the patient population in the U.S. asylums actually decreased by about 30%, because you could have people on these meds. They were now manageable for their families, or they could go to work, or now you're getting them to sort of function in society. Yay, drugs. Communities at this point are pushing for more outpatient services as well as like community health services. So rather than putting somebody somewhere, you are saying, like, can we support them while they're still outside?
Yeah.
The creation of Medicaid in 1965 had a huge role in the decrease of asylum populations. And again, this is not necessarily a good... it's questionable. Medicaid covered nursing homes, but not necessarily mental health asylums. So what would end up happening is that people would be sort of re-diagnosed, or like, oh, well, they could handle this at a nursing home, and they were transferring the patients out of the hospitals into nursing homes.
So I feel like for nursing homes, there's an end. You're not going to stay there much longer. If you're like a 20-year-old who has schizophrenia or whatever, they've got you in there for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I do think that there was probably a large population of, at this point in 1965, patients who had been in the asylum for decades, maybe, their whole lives. And now they're like, well, they're elderly and
Okay. Yeah.
maybe we can move them out. I mean, the problem with all of this is that the push to get people out of the asylums, again, another really great, so well-meaning. But what ends up happening is that people get released well before they're ready. So many patients find themselves either homeless or in jail. They went from one institution to another.
Yeah.
There's debate over the success or not of deinstitutionalization, which is kind of what that push was called in the 50s. So now you have 73 of these massive, and these are just the Kirkbride buildings.
Yeah.
Specifically, 73 of these enormous buildings that had millions of dollars put into them. What has happened to them at this point?
Are you going to tell me where these are in Massachusetts? Because I'm curious.
I will. I'm going to talk about one of them specifically.
Okay.
Let's see if I can get this right. Yeah, off the top of my head, they're Danvers State.
What I figured, yeah.
That's what I'm going to talk about. So we have Danvers State, we have Worcester.
Yep.
Taunton. And Northampton.
Okay.
So that's actually part of...
I was thinking the one in Hanson. I wondered if it was...
That was a tuberculosis hospital.
Okay.
But sort of that similar feeling of like...
That was one that got turned into condominiums, I think.
Yes, well, Danvers got turned into apartments. So, yeah, what a shame, right? We'll get there. So, of the 73 Kirkbride buildings, only 33 of them still exist in essentially their original form. 26 of the 73 were torn down and replaced with modern hospital buildings. So, still functioning, just not. They just probably weren't cost effective to run.
Did they not have like... Okay, I know that it's tuberculosis, but did they not have like tunnels
They did.
underground? Yeah.
Yes. And
Are they still
they
there?
did. Yes.
Like with the people who, whatever the hospital is now, like they still have underground tunnels.
I'm not sure. So the tunnel system, which interestingly didn't come up. So like a lot of this first part of my story, right? I think this is a topic that could have gone several ways. It could have gone like highly creepy and like, oh, so
It is creepy.
it is. And I think
creepy.
in that aspect, I probably would have touched on the tunnels more. Yeah. The beginning of this, we didn't really touch on the tunnels. The tunnels were so, because the space was so huge, and again, they're in places like New England, who has shitty weather sometimes.
Yep.
You can move through the space with tunnels. People who are deceased got moved off of the property through the tunnels and all of that stuff. So yes, and I do actually have...
Yeah, because if you're saying there's like outbuildings, it's just easier to get there sometimes through the tunnels. The word tunnels, any tunnel, just freaks me out.
I'll actually describe, we have a story from a friend who chooses to remain nameless.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because you're not really supposed to go on these properties.
Okay. Yep.
Who had an experience, not an experience. There's a description of the tunnels, actually. And I've seen pictures, and it's weirdly, they're tall. Strangely tall, some of them.
Do they have, like, shackles on the sides sometimes? No. Okay. Because that's...
These ones didn't. Because I think it would be way more interesting if they did. But I think these were really, honestly, for convenience.
I just, us growing up near something, had supposedly
Right.
shackles in the tunnels, and you and I are not risk takers, so we've never been there.
No. Right. I'm the friend that if I go to an abandoned space with you, I'm yelling through the window, please be careful.
Yeah.
And somebody else is the one climbing the stairs that are rotting. Anyway, people. So yes, and yeah, we'll get to that. And that's like you say, the stuff that's around us and sort of the legend behind it and the gossip, and it's interesting. So you do want to kind of go like, there's a real history here with real people, and I think we need to tell it. So
yeah.
Okay, so like I say, 26 of the 73 were torn down and replaced with more modern hospital buildings. 30 of the remaining buildings were actually registered with the National Register of Historic Buildings.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because they're stunning. Actually, one thing that Thomas Kirkbride said was that just because, I'm paraphrasing, just because somebody is mentally ill, they should still have access to the best of things.
Yeah.
So these buildings were built with like just these stunning staircases and beautiful woodwork, and
it's so weird that you say that, because recently I was talking about my husband, who I think stereotypically women a lot of times will like decorate for things, and it's not part of the use of your house.
No,
but it
right.
just makes you like an open shade or something just makes you feel so much better. You could live without an open window, or you could live, I don't know, without pictures on your wall, but it does something mentally to you, and you're just like,
for sure,
there's nothing around, like you're not decorative at all.
Well, right. Think about that. Like, why wouldn't you in your head, why wouldn't it be easier to get better in a beautiful space than a jail looking thing?
Right.
Like hospitals, I don't know what the goal is. I don't know what the theory is behind it, but the color schemes really have to go. I think somebody needs to. Anyway.
Aren't like white and blue is like supposed to be calming though? I don't know. Like you couldn't have like red. No, like orange, something
alarming.
Yeah.
I know. Well, I don't like it. But anyway, it's not. I don't design hospitals, so here we are. Like I said, most of the Kirkbride buildings were in New England or the Midwest. And that could possibly, I don't know, just be the time. At the time, the populations were bigger and we needed...
Well, yeah. We hadn't really expanded.
Right, there wasn't as much. So let's talk about just a couple of these hospitals. Because like I mentioned earlier, I think the rise and fall of most of them is all very similar. And I kind of, a lot of podcasts and TV shows and stuff have picked some of these specifically...
Danvers.
Like Trans-Allegheny. And Danvers, I actually just watched Session 9, which was a movie.
I have seen it, yes. Actually, that's one of Eric's favorites. He's
really?
a huge weirdo. I don't know why, but I do believe that there was like weirdness on the set, because I think they really went there.
They did. They filmed at Danvers. Yeah, it's...
I haven't watched it in a long time, but it is a weird movie.
I watched it the other day. Good actors in it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them. Anyway. That's not
sidebar.
So the point being, I think I could have gone like, okay, I'm going to talk about Trans-Allegheny and very specific on deep dive into what happened. But they were all so similar that I kind of wanted to do a general overview. But Danvers has a couple of notable things about it. So I did just want to kind of dive into that a bit. So multiple names. Danvers Lunatic Asylum, the State Lunatic Hospital at Danvers, the Danvers State Insane Asylum, or Danvers State Hospital. It cost just under $1.5 million to build at the time, which is like $47 million today.
Yeah, that seems about right, though.
Fair, yeah. When you see pictures of it, which I mean, it was beautiful. So it opened on May 1st of 1878. It closed June 24th of 1992.
Like it stopped working?
It
Like,
was
people
like
were...
they released their last patient and the whole thing closed down in 92.
You said 92? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. It was on a space of 500 acres. Mm-hmm. It had space for staff to live on the property. There were tubercular buildings, both male and female. Farm buildings.
Why did they keep them together like that? Not together, but like, what does tuberculosis have to do with?
I think if there was a tuberculosis outbreak, they probably would move them
within
from
the
hospital.
patients. Okay,
yeah. Or right, like maybe somebody in the community who was mentally ill. Maybe it was like
had tuberculosis
and had to go somewhere, and they were probably better equipped. I'm not super sure, but I feel like So yes, farm buildings, cottages, and repair shops, because of course they did. It was essentially like a little town.
Yeah.
They had occupational therapy programs. They had staff training programs. Danvers actually had the second nursing school to open in Massachusetts ever. So they were also the first hospital to hire a female doctor.
Like a legitimate. She's,
What? And that was in 1879.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did she end up being a patient there when her husband left her at some point?
They're like, you read too much.
Right.
How did you get to be a doctor? That's suspicious. Not so wonderfully. It was also considered by many in the field to be the birthplace of the prefrontal lobotomy. It was not invented there. However, they did it so often that it was sort of perfected there. And in the movie Session 9, they really harp on the lobotomy. Like they have the tools and stuff.
Is that okay? So is an ice pick lobotomy different from a different, like, were there different kinds?
No, I think they used
different things.
I think it was called that initially because
here's the
tool
thing,
wasn't invented.
A lobotomy, there are different ways of doing it, right? Like, you can go through the eye, you can. I think penetrating the skull would be too hard to do that. But
so the eye, I believe, was developed after. So they realized it was, I think, through the nose. The nose, initially.
Okay, yeah.
And then they were like, it's actually a lot more accurate, for what it's worth, a lot less difficult. I don't know. They basically had black eyes.
Were they like numbed at least? You know,
they were awake when it happened.
But was it like?
I don't think you could. I think the idea was that you didn't feel it. Like, you don't feel your brain.
Yeah, but you feel it going through whatever orifice it goes through.
No.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, the hospital was meant to house 450 patients, so a little bit bigger than most of the average. However, their max population in 1939 was 2,360 people.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Where are you putting these people?
Well, yep. There are 2 nearby cemeteries in the town that have that's where they went. That have graves of 770 patients, but none of them have names, only numbers.
Do they have the corresponding? If you were to look it up, could you?
So we're going to talk about a different location, not actually at Kirkbride Hospital, but I think if you went into these places after they were shut down and not demolished yet, you would find a lot of medical paperwork. Yeah. A shocking amount.
Just like strewn about, right?
Just left there. And so I think that legitimately a lot of these records were lost
and then destroyed because you get like vermin and like the elements and like
of the Danvers, was it Danvers, or I think all of them at some point. Yeah, part of Danvers burned down. School that I'm going to talk about shortly, part of that burned down. There's a lot of
like nobody from the town was like, oh crap, let's just collect all, because it's medical records. It's
shocking to me. It's shocking.
Wow.
It's really upsetting because the other thing is they released their last patient in 1992.
Right.
I hope they went somewhere.
Yeah, like you could blame it on maybe, I know, if we weren't a country yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And they were
right.
just like, whatever. But 92, like,
you don't need this. I know.
oh my goodness.
So wards actually began shutting down due to budget cuts all the way in 1969. So the administration block closed in 1989, and the building was actually purchased by an apartment developer. I think it's Avalon. I think it's the people that do all the Avalon. There's Avalon apartment complexes flipping everywhere now, and I believe it was them. But they purchased the apartments, the building, and most of the buildings were demolished by June of 2006.
Most of them.
So the brick facade of the main central part, and then one ward on each side, was kept propped up, and then they built new buildings up behind. They erected them behind it, and then like sort of had the facade there. So
it's like a gate, kind of, sort of.
It's like the front of the building, so it looks very similar to how it did, but the actual construction piece is all new. Again, it's apartments now. So one of our friends visited the apartments with their friend who was apartment hunting.
Oh my God.
And and they're cool as hell. Like because they actually use a lot of the old material in.
I don't know if I like that.
Some of it, I don't know, but the wood and the brick.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess.
Like, nice. The potential tenant did explicitly ask if anything strange ever happened, if any of the other tenants reported anything to the staff. And the staff was very closed-mouthed about it, like didn't really give. But I'm certain that they've been trained to not really answer that question.
I also feel like people probably have a lot of people who do just want to check it out and not want to actually, not that that particular person did that, but just everybody knows about Danvers and, you know,
oh, let's act like we're going to go look at an apartment. Yes, right, for sure. So another Kirkbride hospital of note was the Willard Asylum for the Chronic Insane. This was a hospital in New York, I think in like the Finger Lakes area. Make you think of The Office.
Yeah. I'm
sorry. So it was opened in 1869, and they discharged their last patient in 1995.
Okay.
So the building was being converted into actually like a recovery for drug and alcohol. So they had to clear it out, obviously, be responsible. Because this one was actually going to be used, right? So, like, you have to take this one out of it.
Yeah.
And a trip to the attic uncovered over 400 suitcases. They belonged to former patients who came to the hospital between 1910 and 1960. So, as we learned earlier, most of the patients in these facilities never went home.
Guess they didn't need their suitcase, yeah.
So, the suitcases actually made their way to the New York State Museum.
That's good.
A gentleman by the name of John Crispin was allowed by the museum to photograph the suitcases and their contents. And so there's a website, thewillardsuitcases.com, and he's documented everything and just trying to like spread information about what these people's lives were before they became institutionalized. They had lives before they came here. And so you can see the pictures. And the interesting thing is, and I feel this way about, I think most people feel this way about like antiques in general, but you're looking at what was totally normal, just a totally normal piece. Like I'm bringing toothpaste.
Yeah.
But there's just something about the person thought about what I should bring to the hospital with me. And then it gets tucked away. Not even to be used. Like there are pairs of shoes, like beautiful, old. They look like silk.
Yeah.
And it's just so, there's something so profoundly sad about it. Because maybe there was an expectation that they would get cured and they would go home.
Yeah.
I also assume that there were some situations in which maybe the family said, yeah, you're going to come home at some point. And they kind of knew that maybe they weren't. But Either way, it's very, very cool. I highly recommend going to the website, thewillardsuitcases.com. The pictures are fascinating. And he does a couple of videos where he talks about it. And he's very respectful. And it's really cool. So, I wanted to mention that.
I mean, I think that's probably the best case scenario to come out of that, at least.
Mm-hmm.
To kind of give them, like, a voice again.
Yeah. Because, again, like we talked about, there's so much mystery and ooh, it's so
Papers
spooky.
just strewn about and not picked up.
Right. And you're just like, there were people in these buildings up until 30 years ago, some of them.
God, that's so insane to me. Wow. Okay.
So I have one final piece. This is an anecdote. This is not technically an asylum. But this story is about Paul Devers, which is in Taunton, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
It was opened as a state school for the mentally disabled.
A school?
A school. And it was actually opened in 1959 and closed in 2002. It was on 1,200 acres.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What does that even look like? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. This place did have tunnels, very much so.
Well, yeah.
There were many, many different outbuildings. So this particular story takes place in like 2010, 2011-ish, before all of the buildings were destroyed. I think just before this, they had a fire in some of the buildings. All of the buildings were closed to the public, but the outside space was accessible and almost used recreationally. Because you have to figure there's so many paths. There must be so many paths around there. So people are walking and bringing their dogs and stuff.
Actually would be kind of interesting.
I know. The buildings toward the front of the campus were actually being used as office space, which, I don't know.
That might make your job interesting. Who knows?
Yeah. There was a security guard on the property to keep people from entering the buildings. Our friend and people that were with them, he gave them the okay to come back and take pictures later at a different time, but they had to stay out of the tunnels and they couldn't come at night.
So the tunnels were not filled in?
No.
At all? Okay.
Nope.
Because just as an aside, for those who don't know, my mother lives in a former mansion where the guy had his shoe factory across the street, and he literally has... I don't think the entire tunnel is filled in, but they definitely cemented the openings. Yeah. So I would imagine, wouldn't you just at least do that? I mean, just to kind of keep vermin out, or,
I mean, are you keeping vermin out?
Probably not. That's true. Or people. I mean,
No, I mean, people find a way in. Life finds a way.
Finds a way.
Yuck. Kimberly. God. So, the group came back on a different day, but they returned. It was mid to late morning. And they entered the dorms, some medical buildings, and a rec center that had a bowling alley and a basketball court. Yes.
Well, yeah, you get, what did you say, 12,000 acres?
1,200.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Still a lot.
Still a lot, yeah. Yeah.
There were murals still on the walls, though many of the buildings have been vandalized. And so I suppose I could have used her name, because I'm going to use her photos on the Instagram, and I'm going to tag her for credit. There are photos from this story, and the paint on the walls is all flaking. It's lead-based paint, probably.
Yeah.
But you can still see the remnants of the murals. Of course, people have graffitied and
that sucks.
Put really clever, stupid shit on the walls. There were in the rec center there was a pile of wheelchairs. I asked, do you think the employees put them there before they left? And the thought was that probably vandals came in and were messing with them and then just left them. Still kind of weird. Anyway, Medical machines and equipment were just left behind, like an entire x-ray machine.
Was it still usable?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that she would know.
Okay.
But
well, yeah, probably not.
I don't know if anybody's paid for an x-ray lately, but...
Well, that's what I mean. Like, if you can get some for free, like...
Well, but, and you're like, oh, so the state just didn't want to take this, even parts
like,
of it,
donate.
and reuse it?
Yeah.
Anyway. They obtained access to one of the medical buildings. There was a surgical table with the massive light over it.
Oh,
They have that big... There was stuff still inside the autoclave, which is where they clean their instruments.
Okay. Ugh.
Right. Like, you
Were
think
there
about...
lobotomy picks in
who... No, this was a 1959 stage.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they did them. Well, you're also like, what was the circumstance that you just... It's almost as if someone was like, get out now. Do you know what I mean? To leave things actively in an autoclave.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if they're like, you're not being paid, like as an employee, they're like, okay, well, your job's done because the funding's not here.
True,
and
right.
Goodbye. I mean, why would you?
Yeah, put your stuff back.
Yeah.
There was a recovery room. She said it seemed like the surgical recovery room, the curtains were all still hanging, so like in between what would have been where the beds are.
Yeah.
There was a blood machine, which is...
What is that?
I think it's called an ECMO machine now, but the blood is taken out of the patient, oxygenated, and then put back in.
Do people still do that?
Yeah.
Why?
I looked up what it was. Let's all remind everybody. Kim hates medical stuff.
Yeah.
So the reason behind oxygenated blood and returning blood back to the patient is beyond my scope.
Okay.
Google it, everybody. There were sharps containers. Just there. They entered the morgue. There were 2 morgue trays.
This is a school, right?
Yeah.
Why is there a morgue?
If people died. Because they lived there. I mean, it was a residential.
Okay. Why do they call it a school?
To make it sound nice. Really.
All right.
So there were 2 morgue trays, which are the where you open the door and slide the...
Yeah.
They worked. Because, of course,
anyone
these
in
people...
them?
No.
I'm just saying they left paper. They
left paper, not people.
You don't know. I mean, they left
The
a
title
lot
of this
stuff.
episode is going to be Paper, Not People.
Paper, not people.
People had definitely, obviously, broken into that area before. They did find the autopsy room with like a table. And they found giant tubs, obviously used for probably hydrotherapy.
It's so creepy.
I know.
Tubs are creepy.
I hate baths.
Jilli's secretly a cat.
Secretly. So the buildings towards the front of the property had a lot less vandalism. I'm sure that's just because it's easier to hide from people in the back, obviously. Yeah. Signs are still up in areas like, this is the staff
wash your
meeting
hands
room. Like, yeah. Well, she said that too. Bulletin boards still had whatever was relevant at the time, pieces of information on the bulletin boards.
Yeah.
Inside the buildings, most of them were boarded up, so it was kind of hard to tell. It was so dark, and you just kind of couldn't tell what time of day it even was. But they did find x-ray films and patient documents.
Now, I know that they want to remain anonymous.
Yes.
Do you know if they took anything? You don't have to tell me on the podcast. We can talk about it later.
No.
But okay.
They did not take anything.
Well, because if there was... I'm just saying. Well, I don't know. I mean, if they don't care. Clearly, they don't care about the stuff. So it's like,
so when
you could take it.
Because she mentioned the film reels. Oh, I didn't say that, Anne. There were film reels and photos.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I'd be so tempted. But she said the same thing. Like, again, if anybody's seen the movie Session 9 is a recording of a therapy session with somebody with dissociative identity disorder. and session 9 is like, whatever, watch the movie. But it's horrible what you hear on the tape. And so she sort of referenced like, yeah, it's so tempting to try to listen or try to watch, but you're also like, I don't know that I want to see. Or
it would be so even
you
if
see enough scary movies that like there's a curse on a ghost.
True. I guess I mean, they were allowed to go in, right? Somebody
Allowed is
okay.
I think maybe the security guard was unclear.
Okay. All right. Because I just kind of feel like if you did take something, no one would know. You know what I mean?
No, right. It's not like they inventory it.
No.
Right. And
I mean, it is someone's like if you took like medical records, it is someone's medical, but they may not be alive.
The question: how have they not been taken yet?
Maybe I don't know.
To me,
yeah.
I'm stunned that with all the vandalism that's going on, I can't believe somebody hasn't scooped up, and maybe they have, and we just couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But
they couldn't take everything.
No, because and that's what she said. They were just like patient documents, just in mountains on the floor. Again, photos of people, film reels with who knows what on it.
I don't know. I might have taken.
Oh,
some.
So tempting, but I am so risk averse. I would beat myself up.
No,
I would go get my.
You'd bring it back after
machine.
you were done.
Whatever projector. Is that what you have? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I want to watch it in there, though. I'd have to take it home.
Here's a portion of the episode where Jilli and Kim tell everybody that they don't know how old-timey things worked. Anyway, they went into the cafeteria. There were giant walk-in freezers. You could go in it, but she said they stunk. Like, they smelled awful.
Was there stuff in it?
I don't know. I mean, at that point, any food would have had to be bad
completely
or eaten.
Yeah,
I mean,
or completely like I don't know what the word is. Decomposed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Trays and racks for the trays were all sitting there. There's pictures of them. They look just like your average school tray. She did find the upper half of a cat.
No.
I will not be sharing that picture, but yes.
Well, that's
the upper half. I don't like that.
Well, there's predators and stuff.
Ugh. They did enter a tunnel.
I'm so surprised. Like, it would take a lot of money to seal the entire tunnel. I'm just saying, like, the first maybe, like, foot or two. Just to kind of put something.
But I know. Ugh. But there's also, I mean, yes, yeah, but how many entrances in 1,200 acres?
True. Yeah.
So they did not roam the tunnel. They just entered it to kind of see what it was like. She described it as feeling probably 30 degrees cooler than upstairs.
Yeah, but that's like a basement you go in. And
I think she said it was like springish time. I think early summer, springish. It was almost like entering into like a sensory deprivation tank. It was so dark. So she had her camera and it couldn't focus on anything. There was no way. So they were using a flashlight to light things up, which actually gives the effect of very creepy photos.
Oh, I just got chills. Like I could just picture it. Yeah.
She said sound echoed weird in there. And it was just straight up uncomfortable. I think there's probably your brain is going like, oh, weird, creepy things happened here. They moved dead bodies through tunnels. But also just you're under the ground in an area you're not supposed to be in.
Do we know how long these tunnels were? Like, were they like, I mean, if you committed, you'd have to like go to, you know what I mean? Right. Like if you're already like midway.
Ugh. Yuck. I don't know. One of those things where you're just like, should I go back?
Oh, this makes me feel so uncomfortable because that would definitely, I might roam around, but I don't, in the tunnels, I'd be like, just let me know how it went.
I feel like I'd be so afraid to just somehow get trapped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody would know.
Nope. There was a piano just left, which, again, doesn't anybody want any money? So there was an experience. Now, bear in mind, this friend is very skeptical. She doesn't talk about this much because she just fully expects people are not going to believe her. But I wanted to end on a little bit of a spooky note. Give the people what they want. You know what I mean? So there was a dorm that you could actually get access to the roof of the dorm.
Oh.
To get there, you had to go through sort of like a weird long room that had beds, boxes, and piles of bags in it.
What's in the bag?
I don't know. Okay. I mean, we might know.
What's in the box?
However, there was a clear path through the room. Like, clearly people had done it before. So you're not actually stepping on any of the stuff. Bear that in mind. At the end of the room, there are 2 steps to a door that opens to the roof. The rest of the group had gone ahead and out onto the roof, but she and one other person remained in the room. They were about to head out the door, but both heard a child's toy go off.
Did they see the toy?
No.
Ugh.
They stopped, turned to look, and were both kind of like, did you also hear that toy, or was it just me? And no,
What kind of toy? Too. Like, what was it?
I don't know what the sound was. Okay. She didn't, describe it to me. But they knew, they're like, one of our friends had to have, hung back, found something, and were fucking with us.
Either that or, there are, rats and mice and stuff that could, I mean, depending on what it was. I don't know what it was, right. But, you know.
But also, batteries.
Oh, okay. So it was...
Yes. It would have been a toy that required a battery to make the sound. Mm-hmm. Yes. Like an electronic-y sound.
Sometimes... Okay, listen. So, side note. So you said it closed in 92, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the one.
Please hold. 2002.
Okay.
So this was 8 to 9 years later.
So I will say, my mom recently, in the past few years, has cleaned out the boxes in the basement, and it had my toys in it. Now, some of them were battery operated, and they still work. Not well.
Your mother's basement is a terrible choice because it is clearly haunted.
It is haunted. But what I mean is, even if you're not down in the basement, you bring the boxes up, everybody has that weird toy, whether it's a Furby or whether it's something, and it has this the pole, whatever. Mm-hmm. And the voice is warped and stuff, but some juice in the battery is still there. That mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose you'd have to manipulate it, but
well, see, that's the thing.
Yeah,
because you made a point to say we weren't climbing over stuff. There was a clear path to walk through. They fully expected that one of their friends was back there messing with them, but everybody had already gone out onto the roof, so it couldn't have been them. They were dreading going back through the room. She said, I'm not going to be last. And
I think I'd go on the roof. I'd be like, goodbye, I'm going on the roof.
Yeah, but then you have to. The idea, though, is now you're on the roof, how you have to go back in.
Yeah, but then there's more people to come with me because they stay behind.
Exactly.
And, yeah.
Someone did actually poke at the bags to try to elicit the toy going off again if it was just sitting in a bag, and they couldn't get it to do it. So
it was they think it was from a bag.
From one of the bags,
okay.
Yeah. So that was her experience at Paul Devers. I did get another anecdote from another friend, but...
What? Now you have to say it.
I think he would be understanding if I told him what he told me. I think you'd go yeah, I could see you not using that. There was a debate over where it even happened.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie and say, oh, it happened at Taunton State or whatever, yeah. Just for the fun of it. But, so, yes. So, like I said, I did want to kind of end on, I think when you say asylum to people, they sort of expect spookiness. So I wanted to deliver a little bit. But yeah, so that's, the history of mental health in our country. And also, I think, leaving stuff behind like that is. There are pictures from one hospital, canisters with people's cremains were still in it.
Ew.
Just sitting there. There is a photographer who photographed them too, because of the way they're oxidizing. The color of the outside is changing. They're actually quite beautiful. But it's so sad. Nobody came to get them, and then the hospital shut down, and they're just like, okay, bye.
I mean, I kind of feel like that's probably going to happen to me if I don't have children. No, not like... Oh, have you ever had that thought, though, right? Okay, if you're not going to have kids, right? Although
Yes.
you have younger people who care about you. But, like, who's going to keep my ashes? I'm just going to be chilling somewhere. You know what I mean? Like, that just goes back to our previous conversation about, like, everybody has their time, but... Because at some point, unless you have, like, a grave... people don't know who you are anymore.
No,
like,
right.
You're just lost in time. Like,
Right.
who wants your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's ashes? Like,
No.
nobody.
Well, right. And it, yeah. So, I mean, I'm sitting next to several ashes right
No,
now. But
like
that's
a jerk,
just-
but I feel like that's what you and I...
Mike would agree with you.
Or anyone,
Yes.
though. Like, even if... I mean, somebody who likes history or whatever, but at this point, you're like, I have so many... Like, it's my grandma, and my great-grandma, and my
Yes.
great-great-great-grandma. Mm-hmm. What am I do with all this?
I know. And I know.
I know that's not your point, but...
we also... But to kind of bring it back to the point, is you and I have the luxury to say, this is what if I had to, when it happens, I would like XYZ done with them.
True.
These belong to people who basically had no autonomy. They were in an institution. Their family
lives,
didn't come get them. Maybe their family was dead. I mean, maybe they didn't have any family left.
Yeah.
And so now they just get left. It's awfully sad. I'm glad that there are people who are highlighting the history of these people. That they're people, they're actual people. They weren't just...
A number.
Yeah. Mental health patients. What people would have seen at the time as like a burden on society. Whatever. They were people with lives, and I think, a lot of places we could have gone in the direction of like an expose about abuse, and there are several documentaries about that.
That's a bummer.
But right, exactly. It's I think I'm fascinated by the idea that people or the communities or governments or whatever are sort of going like, that's a very interesting piece of history to people, but we don't really care enough about it. If you want to pay me millions of dollars and build some fucking condos, have at it. If you find any shit in there that looks like it belongs to somebody, just throw it away.
That's so sad.
And
they should
that's
at least let people, like certain, like historian people come in and go, look, I'm going to take this, I'm going to try, because people can restore a lot of stuff.
Yes.
So even papers, just take it. I know, kind of side note, but not really. I did or helped do archaeology in Belize, and anything you find is the Belizean countries that's theirs. Mm-hmm. So they're like, cool, thanks for helping us, finding it for us. And then you kind of have to sign it out and do all that stuff. So I feel like it could be the same thing. Like you could, okay, cool, thanks for helping me get these medical records. If you restore it, just, give it back to us and we'll put it somewhere nice, or we'll display it, or, maybe not medical records, but,
Well, right. Even if it's not valuable, or it's a patient who lived in the 1800s and there's nobody left, like you don't even know where to go.
Interesting. Like,
right.
But
even if somebody said, this isn't something anybody wants to keep, okay, then appropriately and respectfully do something with it.
Put it
It's
in
just
an archive or
trash.
something. I don't know. Yeah.
On the ground with half a cat's body. Like, it's just so upsetting.
Yeah.
So,
or like the toys, like, they're modern enough that people wouldn't keep them for like historical stuff. So like, you just get rid of them and kind of, it's money though.
And exactly. Yeah. Yes. Right. So, I don't know. Maybe a bit of a bummer. I'm back on my bummer shit. But
I thought it was interesting. It actually goes pretty kind of hand in hand with the Sideshow Freak Show episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure it does. I mean, it crosses sometimes. So
yeah. So, I've kind of been on that sort of just... And the other thing that I find super interesting is, the dates that some of these places closed down, certainly they weren't functioning the way that they did back originally, but still, there's like, people were living in these buildings in the 90s, some of them. So, but anyway, so I can't wait to share the pictures. I'm really excited.
That's what I was going to say. I'm really excited to see the pictures.
They're, our friend is a beautiful photographer.
You might have to do multiple, because I think you can only do 10 at a post, but you might have to do like a part 2.
There's just, the buildings are stunning. The pictures from the
tunnels,
ruins of the buildings are fascinating. So I'm excited for that Instagram post. I think it will be lovely. So
cool.
Anyway, thank you. Treat people kindly, no matter what's going on with them. You bitches. And don't throw stuff away just because you don't care about it. Maybe somebody else does.
Yeah, agreed.
That's how you become a hoarder. Anyway,
bye.
On that note, love so much. Thanks for listening to Relatively Weird. If you like what you hear, make sure to leave us a review and follow us on your podcast player of choice. You can also find us at Relatively Weird the Pod on Instagram. If you have any stories you'd like us to talk about, send us an email at relatively weirdthepod@gmail.com. See you next week.